Good evening, my fellow Americans. We now stand 10 years past the midpoint of a century that has witnessed 4 major wars among great nations. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
On June 4th, 1963, President John F. Kennedy signs Executive Order 11110, which returned to the U.S. government the power to issue currency without going through the Federal Reserve.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. No president should fear public scrutiny of his program. For from that scrutiny comes understanding, and from that understanding comes support or opposition, and both are necessary. I am not asking your newspapers to support an administration, but I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people. For I have complete confidence in the response and dedication of our citizens whenever they are fully informed. I not only could not stifle controversy among your readers, I welcome it. This administration intends to be candid about its errors. For as a wise man once said, an error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. We intend to accept full responsibility for our errors, and we expect you to point them out when we miss them. Without debate, without criticism, no administration and no country can succeed, and no republic can survive. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. And that is why our press was protected by the First Amendment, the only business in America specifically protected by the Constitution, not primarily to amuse and entertain, not to emphasize the trivial and the sentimental, not to simply give the public what it wants, but to inform, to arouse, to reflect, to state our dangers and our opportunities, to indicate our crises and our choices, to lead, mold, educate, and sometimes even anger public opinion. This means greater coverage and analysis of international news, for it is no longer far away and foreign, but close at hand and local. It means greater attention to improved understanding of the news, as well as improved transmission. And it means, finally, that government at all levels must meet its obligation to provide you with the fullest possible information outside the narrowest limits of national security. And so it is to the printing press, to the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
What is the New World Order? Is it a good thing? Humanitarian? Or is it pure evil? Global domination and slavery? That's up for you to decide. In this film, we will explore history and the psychology of the elite, using quotes and commentaries, providing overwhelming evidence that the globalists have destroyed and undermined the world economy by design to make way for a new world order, a corporate takeover of the world. Here is the dictionary definition of the New World Order. The New World Order refers to the emergence of a bureaucratic, collectivist, one-world government. The common theme in conspiracy theories about a New World Order is that a powerful and secretive elite with a globalist agenda is conspiring to eventually rule the world through a totalitarian world government, which would replace sovereign nation-states and put an end to international power struggles. In this film, you will learn that this is a complete lie. Continuing the definition, significant occurrences in politics and finance are speculated to be orchestrated by an extremely influential cabal operating through many front organizations. This is absolutely true. Numerous historical and current events are seen as steps in an ongoing plot to achieve world domination through secret political gatherings and decision-making processes. This is also true. Prior to the 1990s, the New World Order conspiracyism was limited to two American countercultures, primarily the militantly anti-government right and secondarily fundamentalist Christians concerned with end-time emergence of the Antichrist. Things have changed. People are waking up. There are skeptics such as Michael Barkin and Chip Burlett who have expressed concern that right-wing conspiracy theories. We have the Constitution, we have the Bill of Rights, and we have the Declaration of Independence. This is our country. We can take it back. One patriot at a time. Our rights shall not be infringed. Quote, these political scientists warn that this mass hysteria may not only fuel lone wolf terrorism, but have a devastating effect on American political life, such as the far right wooing the far left into joining a revolutionary third position movement capable of subverting the established political powers. That is the exact purpose of this film. To raise awareness to the evils of the New World Order, to expose their lies and treachery. These oligarchs have but one intention: total world domination. The oligarchs' plan is to unify North America under a common currency, end the sovereignty of the United States, Mexico, and Canada, and institute a global government, surveil our every move, track our every action. This is slavery, delivered with a box of roses. Wake up. Beware the thorns. Woodrow Wilson and Winston Churchill used the term New World Order to refer to a new period in history, evidencing a dramatic change in world political thought and the balance of power after World War I and World War II. They saw a new sense of collective efforts to identify, understand, or address.
What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind: peace and security, freedom, and the rule of law.
Woodrow Wilson and Winston Churchill used the term New World Order to refer to a new period in history, evidencing a dramatic change in world political thought and the balance of power after World War I and World War II. They saw a new sense of collective efforts to identify, understand, or address worldwide problems that go beyond the capacity of individual nation-states to solve. These proposals led to the creation of international organizations such as the United Nations and NATO, and international regimes such as the Bretton Woods system and general agreements on tariffs and trades, which were calculated both to maintain a balance of power. They were to regulate cooperation between nations in order to achieve a peaceful phase of capitalism. Peaceful phase? It appears everything that they say is exactly the opposite that they do. Make war, speak peace, help the economy, destroy the economy. This is the New World Order.
In the aftermath of the horrible Oklahoma City bombing, government propagandists tried to intimidate the people into silence by recklessly linking criticism of the government to acts of murder. Some people ask, how can you fear your government and claim to love your country? Our response is, how can you love your country without fearing your government? Who else holds a counterfeit license to kill, incarcerate, and confiscate for non-crimes? Remember, America is about liberty first and last, not obedience to bureaucrats. The Washington power clique wants you to shut up, get in line, do what you're told to do, and most outrageously, think what you've been told to think. We have hundreds of politicians and thousands of lobbyists crawling all over Washington, thinking of ways to control you, to extend their will over you, to subvert your freedom and replace it with their will, to capture, that is, to steal your life force. And so we should all be very angry, because anger is the engine that drives our will to resist. And without resistance, without awareness, they will take it all. It's not just politically perverse. It's a sin against mankind. Because freedom is actually sacred.
It is perfectly possible for a man to be out of prison and yet not free, to be under no physical constraint and yet to be a psychological captive, compelled to think, feel, and act as the representatives of the national state or of some private interest within the nation wants him to think, feel, and act. The nature of psychological compulsion is such that those who act under constraint remain under the impression that they're acting on their own initiative. The victim of mind manipulation does not know that he is a victim. To him, the walls of his prison are invisible, and he believes himself to be free. That he is not free is apparent only to other people. His servitude is strictly objective. Aldous Huxley, Brave New World Revisited, 1958. In 1790, Amschel Rothschild stated, "Let me issue and control a nation's money, and I care not who makes its laws." In 1791, the Rothschilds get their wish, the control of a nation's money, our nation, through their agent Alexander Hamilton, a member of George Washington's cabinet. The Rothschilds set up a central bank in the United States called the First Bank of the United States, established with a 20-year charter. In 1811, the Rothschilds' First Bank of the United States charter ran out, and Congress voted against its renewal. Nathan Meyer Rothschild was enraged. He stated, "Either the application for renewal of the First Bank of the United States is granted, or the United States will find itself embroiled in a most disastrous war." The United States and President James Madison stood firm, and the charter for the First Bank of the United States was not renewed. Nathan Rothschild then issued another threat. "Let's teach those impudent Americans a lesson. Bring them back to colonial status." In 1812, backed by the Rothschild money and Nathan Rothschild's orders, the British declare war on the United States. The Rothschilds' plan was to cause the United States to build up such a debt in fighting the war that they would have to yield and allow the charter of the First Bank of the United States to be renewed. In 1816, the United States Congress passed a bill permitting another Rothschild-dominated central bank, which once again gives the Rothschilds control of the American money supply. They broke our back, and they're breaking it again. This bank is called the Second Bank of the United States, and it's given a 20-year charter. So, thousands of British and American soldiers dead later, the Rothschilds get their bank. In 1832, President Andrew Jackson runs the campaign for his second term of office under the slogan, "Jackson and no bank." Jackson planned to take control of the money system to benefit the American people, not further enrich the profiteering Rothschilds. In 1833, President Jackson starts removing the government deposits from the Rothschild-controlled Second Bank of the United States and deposits the funds into banks directed by Democratic bankers. This angered the Rothschilds to panic, and they contract the money supply, causing a depression. President Jackson, aware of their agenda, later states, "You are a den of thieves and vipers, and I intend to rout you out, and by eternal God, I will rout you out." On January 30th, 1835, an assassin tried to shoot President Andrew Jackson, but fortunately, both of the assassin's shots misfired. Jackson later claimed he knew the Rothschilds were responsible for the assassination attempt. In 1836, following years of battles against the Rothschilds and their central bank, President Andrew Jackson finally succeeds in routing out the Rothschilds when the Second Bank of the United States charter is not renewed. They lost the battle, but the war is not over. It rages on and on, through the years, through the decades, and through the centuries. In 1861, President Abraham Lincoln approached the big banks in New York to try and obtain loans to support the American Civil War. As these large banks were heavily influenced by the Rothschilds, they offered Lincoln a deal they knew he could not accept: 24 to 36% interest on all monies loaned. The gangster banksters in action once again. Angered by the high rate of interest, Lincoln decides to print debt-free money through the Department of Treasury and informs the public that this money is now legal tender for all debts, public and private. By April 1862, $449,338,902 worth of Lincoln's debt-free currency had been printed and distributed into circulation. Lincoln stated, "We gave the people of the Republic the greatest blessing they ever had, their own paper money to pay their own debts." In 1863, Lincoln learns that Tsar Alexander II of Russia was refusing the Rothschilds' attempt to set up a central bank in Russia. In a surprise move, the Tsar issued orders that if England or France actively interferes with the American Civil War to help the South, Russia would consider such an action a declaration of war, and that he would side with Lincoln. To further emphasize his point, Tsar Alexander II sent part of his fleet to ports in both San Francisco and New York. On November 21, 1864, President Lincoln, in a letter to Colonel William F. Elkins, wrote, and I quote, "I see in the near future a crisis approaching that unnerves me and causes me to tremble for the safety of my country. Corporations have been enthroned, and an era of corruption in high places will follow, and the money power of the country will endeavor to prolong its reign by working upon the prejudices of the people, until all the wealth is aggregated in a few hands, and the Republic is destroyed." In early 1865, in an address to Congress, Lincoln stated, "I have two great enemies, the Southern Army in front of me and the financial institutions in the rear. Of the two, the one in the rear is my greatest foe." During the Republican National Convention in 1880, a compromise was struck to nominate former minister and elder for the Church of Christ, James A. Garfield of the party's half-breed faction. Chester A. Arthur, former collector for the Port of New York, was chosen to be Garfield's running mate to satisfy the Stalwarts faction. Senator Roscoe Conkling, who had mentored Chester A. Arthur since the late 1860s and had granted him a $10,000 a year tax commission post, was not consulted by Garfield about the appointment of William H. Robertson as collector of the Port of New York. Conkling, along with fellow New York State Senator Thomas C. Platt, resigned. Conkling tried to force the Republican majority of the New York State Legislature to re-elect him, affirming his status as the New York Republican leader, but was successfully blocked by the half-breed faction, and Conkling's congressional career ended. The squabble consumed the Garfield presidency, overshadowing promising activities such as Postmaster General James' investigation of the Star Route postal frauds, and Secretary of Treasury William Wyndham's successful refinancing of the federal debt. On July 2, 1881, at 9:30 a.m., at the 6th Street Railroad Station in Washington, D.C., President James A. Garfield was shot by Charles J. Guiteau, a failed lawyer and bill collector. Guiteau was a member of the utopian religious sect known as the Oneida Community, founded by John Humphrey Noyes in Oneida, New York, in 1848. The community believed in perfectionism, that Jesus Christ had already returned in the year 70, making it possible for them to bring about Christ's kingdom themselves and be free of sin and perfect in this world, not just heaven. They shared property and possessions and had unorthodox sexual practices. Guiteau never fit in. He left the group after 5 years and obtained his law license in Chicago. Soon his interest turned to politics. He wrote a speech called Grant versus Hancock, which he revised to Garfield versus Hancock after Garfield won the Republican presidential nomination in 1880. Ultimately, he changed little more than the title and replaced Grant's achievements with Garfield's. The speech was delivered twice, and copies were passed out to members at the Republican National Committee at their 1880 meeting in New York. After the election, Guiteau believed himself to be largely responsible for Garfield's victory. He insisted, as reward for his vital assistance, he should be granted an ambassadorship. His requests to the President and cabinet members were continually rejected. On May 14, 1881, he was finally told personally by Secretary of State James G. Blaine never to return. Soon after, Guiteau decided that God had commanded him to kill the ungrateful president. Knowing little about firearms, he borrowed $15 and purchased a .442 Webley British Bulldog revolver. Guiteau wanted one with ivory grips because it would look good as a museum exhibit after the assassination, but could not afford the extra dollar. President Garfield was shot that hot July morning by the self-proclaimed stalwart of the stalwarts. Garfield would have survived had the doctors not inserted their unsterilized fingers into the wound, probing for the bullet. This caused infection and blood poisoning, for which at the time there were no antibiotics. President Garfield died at 10:35 p.m. on Monday, September 19, 1881, having lingered bedridden with fevers, extreme pain, and bronchial pneumonia. Not an assassination orchestrated by the Rothschild, Rockefeller, and Morgan interests, but one that no less benefited them. Chester A. Arthur became president and offered Roscoe Conkling an appointment to the U.S. Supreme Court, although it was thought the gesture was merely complimentary. That Conkling was too partisan to make a good justice, and that Arthur was paying back his patron with the honor of nomination. In fact, Conkling and Arthur were so intimately associated that it was feared after President Garfield was assassinated that the killing had been done at Conkling's behest in order to install Arthur as president. On March 13, 1881, Tsar Alexander II was assassinated. Nikolai Rysakov, a young member of the People's Will movement, exploded a bomb under the Tsar's carriage. The bomb didn't kill the Tsar, but a second, tossed by another young member of the movement, Ignacy Hirnowicki, sealed the Tsar's fate. The assassination caused a great setback for the Russian reform movement. Alexander II drafted plans for an elected parliament, or Duma, which were completed the day before he died, but not yet released to the Russian people. Had he lived, Russia might have followed a path to constitutional monarchy instead of the long road of oppression that defined his successor's reign. The first action Alexander III took after his coronation was to tear up those plans. A parliament would not come into fruition until 1905, when Alexander II's grandson, Nicholas II, commissioned the Duma, following extreme pressure on the monarchy as a result of the Russian Revolution of 1905. A second consequence of the assassination was anti-Jewish legislation. A third consequence of the assassination was that suppression of civil liberties in Russia and police brutality burst back in full force after experiencing some restraint under the reign of Alexander II. Alexander II's murder was witnessed firsthand by his son, Alexander III, and his grandson, Nicholas II. Both future Tsars arrested protesters and uprooted suspected rebel groups, creating further suppression of personal freedom for the Russian people. On the night of July 16, 1918, Tsar Nicholas II and his entire family were slaughtered by the Bolsheviks, all executed in the same room, even though they had already abdicated power on March 15, 1917. The family was murdered at the orders of the Rothschilds, who, along with the Rockefellers and the J.P. Morgan banks, had great influence over the Bolsheviks, having supplied them with loans to finance the February 1917 revolution. This was done not only to gain control of the country of Russia, but as a long-remembered act of revenge against Tsar Alexander II, who sided with President Lincoln in 1864, and his father, Tsar Alexander I, who blocked the Rothschilds' plan for world government in 1815 at the Congress of Vienna. which was later used as the model for the League of Nations and the United Nations.
My fellow citizens, recent events have imposed upon the patriotic people of this country a responsibility and a duty greater than that of any since the Civil War.
Scientific societies are as yet in their infancy. It is to be expected that advances in physiology and psychology will give governments much more control over individual mentality than they now have, even in totalitarian countries. Fitch laid it down that education should aim at destroying free will, so that, after pupils have left school, they shall be incapable, throughout the rest of their lives, of thinking or acting otherwise than as their schoolmasters would have wished. Diet, injections, and injunctions will combine from a very early age to produce the sort of character and the sort of beliefs that the authorities consider desirable. And any serious criticism of the powers that be will become psychologically impossible. Bertrand Russell, 1953. After 2 world wars, the progressives welcomed these new international organizations, but they argued that they had democracy issues and therefore were inadequate not only to prevent another global war, but also to foster global justice. Activists around the globe formed a World Federalist movement bent on creating a real New World Order. In the 1940s, British writer and futurist H.G. Wells would go further by appropriating and defining the term New World Order as a synonym for the establishment of a scientifically managed world state and socialist economy. Doublespeak. George Orwell, 1984. Animal Farm. Huxley's Brave New World. That's the New World Order. Doublespeak. Socialism, communism, fascism. Take away your liberty, take away your rights. Plan. It's like a game of chess. You position your pieces, and when the timing is right, you strike. Be aware. They're going to strike. They've already started. Long ago. American writer Mary M. Davison, in her 1966 booklet, The Profound Revolution, traced the alleged New World Order conspiracy to the creation of the U.S. Federal Reserve System in 1913. This is absolutely true. The Federal Reserve was ratified by only 3 members of Congress in a closed session. What is even more disturbing is the bill was not ratified by all the states, yet passed into law. The floodgates swung open. The central bank, known as the Federal Reserve, loans money to the United States government at interest, then puts the money into circulation. So every dollar we earn, every dollar we spend, has interest on it before we spend it. Mary Davison's 1966 booklet also revealed that the Council of Foreign Relations, created in 1921, was a front shadow government for the New World Order. In this film, you will learn about the inner workings of the true shadow government that holds the power in this country. There are no Democrats. There are no Republicans. There is no difference. There is only division. And this is by design. It's an illusion for the people. The Bilderberg Group, David Rockefeller, the Ford Foundation, and others finance the campaigns to push forth their global agenda for world domination. A North American Union is proposed. This would end the United States sovereignty as a nation, take away our freedoms. This must not happen. The goal of this film is to raise awareness. If we don't act, tyranny will surely reign. George Orwell wrote in the book 1984, written in 1948, I quote, "The party seeks power entirely for its own sake. We are not interested in the good of others. We are interested solely in power. Not wealth nor luxury, nor life or happiness. Only power. Pure power. Power is not a means, it is an end. One does not establish a dictatorship in order to safeguard a revolution. One makes the revolution in order to establish the dictatorship. If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever." In 1939, H.G. Wells published A New World Order. Here is a quote. "Directly we grasp this not very obscure truth, that there can be, and are, different sorts of money dependent on the economic usages or system in operation, which are not really interchangeable, then it becomes plain that a collectivist world order, whose fundamental law is such a declaration of rights as we have sketched, will have to carry on its main primary operations, at least, with a new world money, a specially contrived money, differing in its nature from any sort of money conventions that have hereto served human needs. It will be issued against the total purchasable output of the community in return for the workers' services to the community." The Obama administration proposes mandatory service of all citizens under the guise of giving back to the community.
The service has fallen almost exclusively onto the backs of our military. And that's why I won't just ask for your vote as a candidate. I will ask for your service, your active citizenship on our President of the United States.
Citizenship is not an entitlement program. It comes with responsibility.
A young person joining our military must know that we will only send them into harm's way when we absolutely must. We need to ease the burden on our troops while meeting the challenges of the 21st century.
Stalin said, give me somebody before age 7 that can turn them into anything I want. So that's why there's this push. Get the kids into the school system. Get them to not follow evidence. Get them to only do as they're told. Get them to be little robots. Get them to think it's normal to march up in lines and act like little soldiers and so forth. And then later in life, they'll never know to do it.
The word mandatory is just another way of saying ordered. I order you to give back to the community. We Americans, in many ways, consistently give back to the community. However, it is by choice. mandating it, once again, strips away liberty. Our government, who works for us, by us, and of us, we the people, are once again being mandated and manipulated by our corrupt government, desensitizing us by a slow, crafty, incremental dissolution of our basic rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the right to bear arms and hold property. These rights are slowly being eroded, but it's an insidious erosion because it's done incrementally, without notice, one by one, little by little. The mandatory service proposed by the Obama administration is for all citizens 18 to 65, but of course it is geared towards the vibrant, impressionable, easily manipulated youth of this country, our children. Also in 1939, H.G. Wells wrote, "The Fate of Man," and I quote, "This world youth movement claims to represent and affect the politico-social activities of a grand total of 40 million adherents under the age of 30. It may play an important and increasing role in the consolidation of a new world order." In the foreword to the 1946 edition of Brave New World, Aldous Huxley wrote, "A really efficient totalitarian state would be one in which the all-powerful executive of political bosses and their army of managers control a population of slaves who do not have to be coerced because they love their servitude. To make them love it is the task assigned. In present-day totalitarian states, to ministries of propaganda, newspaper editors and school teachers, the greatest triumphs of propaganda have been accomplished not by doing something, but by refraining from doing. Great is truth, but still greater from a practice." Henry Kissinger said in the Seattle Post-Intelligence in 1975, "Our nation is uniquely endowed to play a creative and decisive role in the New World Order, which is taking form around us." Albert Speer, Hitler's Minister for Armaments at the Nuremberg trials after World War II, testified, "Hitler's dictatorship differed in one fundamental point from all its predecessors in history. It was the first dictatorship in the present period of modern technical development, a dictatorship which made complete use of all technical means for the domination of its own country." Think about that for a moment. And think about the corporate-controlled mainstream media propaganda, the resistance to truth, the reluctance for transparency with promises of both. Albert Speer continued, "Through technical devices like the radio and the loudspeaker, 80 million people were deprived of independent thought. It was thereby possible to subject them to the will of one man."
In einer stolzen Selbsteinschätzung, mutig und kühn, die Führung des Reiches und Volkes forderte, hat das Volk sich in immer größerer Zahl dieser Führung angeschlossen und unterstellt.
globalist, CFR, and Trilateral Commission member Ted Turner, the owner of CNN, in an interview with Larry King in 1997, quoted, "I've always been a strong UN proponent. Who was that guy that had the round table? Arthur? One for all for one." President William Clinton addressed the nation in 1998 with these words, "Our overriding environmental challenge tonight is the worldwide problem of climate change, global warming, the gathering crisis that requires worldwide action. Rarely have Americans lived through so much change in so many ways in so short a time. Quietly, but with gathering force, the ground is shifted beneath our feet as we have moved into an information age, a global economy, a truly new world." Arthur Schlesinger Jr., in Foreign Affairs in July of 1995, stated, "We are not going to achieve a new world order without paying for it in blood as well as in words and money." That quotation and the following, and many others like them, demonstrate that the words New World Order are deadly serious and furthermore have been used for decades. The old world order is one based on independent nation states. The New World Order involves the elimination of the sovereignty and independence of nation states and some form of world government. This means the end of the United States of America, the U.S. Constitution, and the Bill of Rights as we now know them. Most of the New World Order proposals involve the conversion of the United Nations and its agencies to a world government, complete with a world army, a world parliament, a world court, global taxation, and numerous other agencies to control every aspect of human life: education, nutrition, population, healthcare, immigration, communications, commerce, agriculture, finance, transportation, the environment, and many more. Dr. Henry Kissinger at the Bilderberg Conference in Evian, France in 1991 said, "Today, America would be outraged if UN troops entered Los Angeles to restore order." This is in reference to the 1991 LA riots. He continued, "Tomorrow, they will be grateful. This is especially true if they were told that there was an outside threat from beyond, whether real or promulgated, that threatened our very existence. It is then that all peoples of the world will plead to deliver them from this evil. The one thing every man fears is the unknown. When presented with this scenario, individual rights will be willingly relinquished for the guarantee of their well-being granted to them by world government. This is the New World Order." These are evil, nefarious people. They are eugenists. They do not care about us. They do not care about our needs, about our families, about the love we have for our children and our country. To them, we are insignificant beings, cattle, sheep to the slaughter. F. Scott Fitzgerald, when asked about the wealthy, replied, "They're not like us." The reporter noted, "Of course they're not like us. They have more money than us." Whereas Fitzgerald replied, "No, it's something deeper than that. Much deeper than that. These are sociopaths who have financed every war in the 20th century on both sides. They are responsible for the deaths of hundreds of millions of people through war, poverty, starvation. They hide behind a shield of philanthropy and humanitarian efforts, which are shams. The globalists wish to depopulate the earth, and they're doing a very good job of it. To believe this, I know, is incredibly difficult. For the insidiousness is incomprehensible. Make no mistake about it. They are in control. But we can take back control. The people have the power.
Saturday to the Bohemian Grove, a private club of businessmen outside of San Francisco. Today he canceled it and said the club has a tradition of speeches off the record. If he spoke, the press would try to find out what he said there, likely would succeed, and he didn't want to violate the club's tradition of privacy.
Without the media's complicity, the New World Order never would have rose to the power that it has today. That's why they have to keep everyone in the dark. It's all a big distraction. TV shows and reality programming and celebrity gossip, all to keep the eye off the prize. And the prize is our liberty, which is being destroyed every day. Here is a quote from David Rockefeller, founder of the Trilateral Commission, in an address to the meeting of the Trilateral Commission in June of 1991. We are grateful to the New York Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been more subject to the bright lights of publicity during those years. But the work is now much more sophisticated and prepared to march towards a world government. The supernatural sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national autodetermination practiced in past centuries. For 500 years, the Rothschild dynasty has ruled the banking world. This is the New World Order. Rothschild, money and gold, have held a mystical type of fascination for many people around the world, but particularly in the United States. Over the years, the United States, the international bankers, have come in for a great deal of criticism by a wide variety of individuals who have held high offices of public trust. Men whose opinions are worthy of note and whose responsibilities placed them in positions where they knew what was going on behind the scenes in politics and high finance. President Andrew Jackson, the only one of our presidents whose administration totally abolished the national debt, condemned the international bankers as a den of vipers, which he was determined to rout out of the fabric of American life. Jackson claimed that if only the American people understood how these vipers operated on the American scene, there would be a revolution before morning. Needless to say, these corrupt elite attempted no less than 3 times to assassinate President Andrew Jackson. Popular history records John Wilkes Booth as the assassin of Abraham Lincoln. This is true. That there was a conspiracy, this is also true. That the money came from international bankers in Canada to fund the assassination, this is also true. International bankers who were upset by the Banking Reform Act, 1864. Lincoln was in the process of removing power from the central bank back to the people where it duly belongs. For this he lost his life, and many others who attempted to expose the evil of this secret society known as the New World Order. In 1921, Congressman Louis T. McFadden, who for more than 10 years served as the chairman of the Banking and Currency Committee, stated that the international bankers are a dark crew of financial pirates. I could not have characterized them better. Back to the quote. Who would, quote, cut a man's throat to get $1 out of his pocket. They prey upon the people of these United States. McFadden was in the process of impeaching the Federal Reserve and all its members for treason when he was poisoned at a banquet in 1922. John Hyland, then mayor of New York, said in 1911 that the real menace of our republic is the invisible government which, like a giant octopus, sprawls its slimy length over our city, state, and nation. At the head is a small group of banking houses, generally referred to as international bankers. We've been talking about the New World Order, about the psychology of the elite and their goals for global domination, complete control, eugenics, population reduction. They're doing a good job of it. They've been responsible for hundreds of millions of deaths. They funded communism, fascism, both sides of every war in the last 100 or plus years. The globalists vigorously attempt to censor web content and influence worldwide opinion. Their greatest threat to world domination lies here in America, with the North American Union and the proposed Marrow currency. End of sovereignty, reduction of liberty and rights, total control of the money supply. It is slavery. Let's talk about the trusts. Theodore Roosevelt broke the trusts, broke up the monopolies. 100 or so years later, now we have duopolies. In not too long, we'll have monopolies again. There are legal ones. Major League Baseball is a legal monopoly. John D. Rockefeller said, competition is a sin. Let's talk about sin. In 1921, the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR, was founded, mainly through Colonel House's influence, another corrupt bankster. It was created to build the needed network of globalist support groups. It would disperse tens of millions of dollars annually from the major tax-exempt foundations, such as the Carnegie and Rockefeller Foundations. What absolute tyranny. They create these tax-free organizations, which are just ways to avoid paying taxes, that they implemented on the rest of the world. And in the case of the income tax, it's completely illegal, completely unconstitutional. Yet if you don't pay, you're going away. Off to the gulag, off in chains, for an unconstitutional law that is supported by our courts. Now the Carnegie, Rockefeller, and Ford Foundations, they're all members of the CFR. and the Trilateral Commission, which is created much later, and I'll go into that later. But the CFR would be the U.S. equivalent of the British RIIA, the Royal Institute of International Affairs. Both the Council on Foreign Relations and the Royal Institute of International Affairs were drawn up in Paris in 1921. Now back to sin. We're going to be talking about that a lot. In 1925, the Rockefeller Foundation founded the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Psychiatry in Munich, directed by Dr. Ernst Rudin. Additional funding was provided by the Harrimans, the Warburgs, and the British Crown. All part of the New World Order, all part of the global scheme. The funding continued to sponsor the Institute and its Nazi leader throughout the devastating Holocaust of World War II. That is just sickening. Also in 1925, the Rockefeller Foundation's grant gives birth to the International Bureau of Education. Woo! That's why when you go to school, they always talk about the UN and global government and how good it is, and we're all going to shake hands and be happy, and everything's going to be great, and we're all going to love each other. It's all just a front. These criminals steal, wage war, and profit from it. That's all they do, and kill if anyone gets in their way. We will further uncover this as we move along. In 1932, the Rockefeller Foundation president, Max Mason, tells trustees that the social sciences will, and I quote, concern themselves with the rationalization of social control, the control of human behavior. 1932. Also in 1932, Dr. Ernst Rudin, the Nazi director of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Psychiatry, funded by the Rockefellers, was appointed president of the Global Eugenics Federation. In 1934, a Rockefeller Progress Report asks, can we develop so sound and extensive a genetics that we can hope to breed in the future superior men? Remember, when I get back to us, these people feel that there is a certain genetic code to the elite, that certain people are better than other people just by birthright, bloodline, and they want to remove malcontents from this message. 1930 to 33, Hitler came to power and delegated Rudin, that's right, the great Dr. Ernst Rudin, Nazi director of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Psychiatry, which called for the sterilization or death of people considered racially impure. The Rockefeller Foundation funded an anthropological survey of the eugenically corrected population by Nazi eugenists Rudin and others. In 1939, the Rockefeller Foundation helps to launch the School Health Coordination Service. You see what's going on here? I mean, it's just horrific. The implications in today's society, what is happening to us today, with the inoculations in the schools, with this indoctrination of global governance, and leaving out all the bad things and just painting this beautiful, lovely, flowery picture. This couldn't be further from the truth. By the end of this film, you will see how destructive, corrupt, and evil the New World Order's intentions are, masked with a smile, masked with a handshake. Do not be deceived. In the 1940s, Ottmar Verschuer and his assistant, Dr. Joseph Mengele, together wrote reports for special courts, which enforced Rudin's racial purity law against the illegal cohabitation of Aryans and non-Aryans. In the early 1940s, a large factory was built at Auschwitz to utilize the Standard Oil IG Farben patents with concentration camp slave labor to make gasoline from coal. So, the Nazi planes couldn't fly. There would be no war. The SS guarded the Jewish and other inmates and selected for killing those who were unfit for IG Farben slave labor. Standard Oil and German President Emil Heilfik testified after the war at the Nuremberg trial that the Standard Oil funds, Rockefeller, helped to pay for the SS guards at Auschwitz. The Rockefeller Foundation defends its record by claiming that the funding of Nazi Germany programs during World War II was limited to psychiatric research. In 1943, the Rockefeller Foundation helped fund the Allen Memorial Institute at McGill University in Montreal. Working with the Canadian military and the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, it became the CIA in 1947 under Prescott Bush. That's right, the father and grandfather of Bush the First and Bush the Second. Dr. Cameron conducted torturous experiments on human guinea pigs in order to perfect various mind control techniques. This is well known, giving soldiers LSD, driving them crazy, literally insane. These brainwashing tactics included coercive interrogation, psychosurgery, drugs, hypnosis, and between 30 to 60 electroshocks over a short period, along with powerful tranquilizers to control anxiety. Cameron's justification? His patients, like prisoners of communists, tended to resist and had to be broken down. These are the evilest, most heinous people on earth, and they're coming after America. This information I previously described can be found in the 1989 book, Journey into Madness, the true story of the CIA mind control and medical abuse. Also in 1943, Joseph Mengele was appointed medical commandant of the Auschwitz concentration camp. In 1973, after a trip to China, David Rockefeller praised Mao Zedong, who had slaughtered over 40 million people. His report, From a China Traveler, highlights the goals presented in UN reports such as the Commission on Global Governance and UNESCO's Our Creative Diversity. Both focus on lofty ideals such as peace, harmony, and unity in the communitarian global village, quote-unquote. A vision that demands absolute control and universal participation in facilitated small groups modeled by the hierarchy of Soviets or councils in communist lands. The New York Times reported on August 10, 1973, a quote from Rockefeller. One is impressed immediately by the sense of national harmony. Whatever the price of the Chinese Revolution, it has obviously succeeded in fostering high morale and community purpose. General social and economic progress is no less impressive. The enormous social advances of China have benefited greatly from singleness and ideology of purpose. It's from the banksters pulling the money from America to China, taking away our manufacturing. Oh, we buy all their products. They hold our debt and buy our land. And one day, reckoning will come. That's why we must stand up and fight while there's still a chance to take back our great nation, take back the Federal Reserve, give the power back to the people where it belongs. I want you to listen very carefully to the next quote. David Rockefeller said, "The social experiment in China under Chairman Mao's leadership, is one of the most important and successful in history. New York Times, 8/10/1973. In 1974, in his book Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, Anthony Sutton documented the fact that Rockefeller and the Morgan banks provided the Bolsheviks with loans. The story goes on and on, ladies and gentlemen, over and over again. Constant through history. While American industry provided them with the plants and the technology they needed, Westinghouse, Henry Ford, Harriman, Exxon, and other American firms, including Arm & Hammer, first built the infrastructure that allowed the Soviet Union to survive. Dr. Stanley Monteith, Brother of Darkness, Oklahoma City, Hearthstone Publishing, 2000, page 71. In 1979, supported by the Rockefeller Foundation and the National Institute of Education and the U.S. Department of Education, Schooling for a Global Age is published. In the preface, John Goodlad wrote, "Enlightening social engineering is required to face situations that demand global action now. Education is a long-term solution. Parents and the general public must be reached also. Otherwise, children and youth enrolled in globally oriented programs may find themselves in conflict with values assumed in the home. And then the educational institution free." In 1987, among the notable members of the Study Commission on Global Education were then Governor Bill Clinton, AFT President Albert Shanker, Professor John Goodlad, Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching President Ernest Boyer, and Fred Newman, President of the Education Commission of the States. Together they prepared a report titled "The United States Prepares for Its Future: Global Perspectives in Education." The Rockefeller, Ford, and Exxon foundations helped fund this report. In the foreword, New Ager Harlan Cleveland, author of The Third Triad World Order, wrote, "A dozen years ago, teaching and learning in global perspective was still exotic doctrine, threatening the orthodoxies of those who still thought of American citizenship as the amalgam of American history, American geography, American lifestyles, and American ideas. It now seems almost conventional to speak of the American citizenship in the same breath with international interdependence and planetary environment." We've been talking about the New World Order, a secret organization that has flourished for over 500 years, whose goal is complete control. We've discussed the psychology of the elite and their goal for global domination, their love of eugenics and science and banking. We discussed games such as Risk, where the people are the pieces, not plastic, and population reduction is a reality, not a myth. We've discussed the funding of terrorism, we've discussed the funding of communism, we've discussed the funding of fascism, the funding of both sides of every war in the last 100 years. The evil still continues. In March 1915, J.P. Morgan interests and the steel shipbuilding and powder interests and their subsidiary organizations got together 12 men high up in the newspaper world and employed them to select the most influential newspapers in the United States, and sufficient number of them to control generally the policy of the daily press. They found that it was only necessary to purchase the control of 25 of the greatest papers. In 1917, U.S. Congressman Oscar Callaway stated, "An agreement was reached. The policy of the papers was bought to be paid for by the month An editor was furnished for each paper to properly supervise and edit information regarding the questions of preparedness, militarism, financial policies, and other things of national and international nature considered vital to the interests of the purchasers. The corporate media has been controlled since 1915. The world is governed by very different personages from what is imagined by those who are not behind the scenes. Benjamin Disraeli, first Prime Minister of England, in a novel he published in 1844 called Coningsby, The New Generation. What is important to dwell upon, the increasing evidence of the existence of a secret conspiracy throughout the world for the destruction of organized government and the letting loose of evil. Christian Science Monitor, editorial, June 19, 1920. Protectionism was always looked down upon by the global elitists of the New World Order. But think about it. If we had protected our borders, if we had stopped the importing of cheap goods produced by slave labor, the tax loops which allowed companies and corporations to take jobs away from Americans, take manufacturing to other countries, to implode our economy, take all the jobs away, to make us dependent on the state. Well, that is the New World Order's intention. To take away our rights, to take away our property, tearing us down little by little, brick by brick. We are the most powerful country on earth, and they are tearing us down. Because in the New World Order, no country can stand tall above the rest. No country can be allowed to have the power to prosper. We all must become slaves to their design or resist. President McKinley was murdered. A protectionist, he believed America should sustain itself on its own production. For if a country cannot supply the food and resources necessary for its own survival, how could it ever flourish? There's one answer. It cannot. It will ultimately die and be dependent upon. The time has come to realize the path we are heading down. The time has come to awaken to the reality of your worst nightmare, gradually, slowly coming true. How did this happen? The beginning of the end was the end of corporate citizenship. In the early 20th century, the Rockefeller family were subjected to tremendous tax burdens. Due to these tax burdens, they petitioned the government to eliminate the corporate citizenship rule. Up until this time, corporations had charters of 10 years and they must prove that their business practice was in the public good. Of course, Rockefeller did not want to adhere to this, so thereby eliminated the need for the charter and review. Corruption ensued. Colossal Ponzi schemes. In 1907, J.P. Morgan, a very influential banker, put word out on the street that several banks were in dire straits. Depositors removed their money in droves. The huge banking scandal caused tremendous loss of homes, businesses, livelihoods, and caused abject poverty across the nation. Morgan came in as the hero and rescued the banks and called for a powerful central bank that would protect the economy of the United States. The globalists were in position to move and create the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, which was drawn up secretly by bankers in 1910 on Jekyll Island. As mentioned earlier in this film, it was never properly ratified, so it is therefore unconstitutional and illegal. We are living under tyranny, and we don't even know it. We must wake up and realize who is holding the strings and not pay attention to the puppets or what they preach. In 1954, the Bilderberg Group met for the first time. It is a committee of 39 persons who cannot be elected. They are the inner core of the group, the decision makers. Their task will be to transfer the ideas to the invited persons on an annual basis. The annual members are different every year, like the location of the meetings, and personally invited by the steering committee. The real purpose of the meetings is to speed up the execution of the aims for the New World Order, One World Government. On January 6, 2009, Henry Kissinger, a member of the Bilderberg Group, the Council on Foreign Relations, and the Trilateral Commission, told CNBC that he believes the current world economic crisis is a great opportunity for President-elect Obama to help create a new world order. What do you think the most important thing is for Barack Obama? Kissinger was asked. If you had to say this is going to be the country or the conflict or the place that will define the Obama administration, what would it be? Kissinger replied, the president-elect is coming into office at a moment when there are upheavals in many parts of the world simultaneously. You have India, Pakistan, you have a jihadist movement, but, Kissinger continued, he can give new impetus to American foreign policy, partly because of the ascension of him is so extraordinary and admirable. Sure, he's the only candidate in history who actually campaigned for president in a foreign country. This is a man I voted for. This is a man I had faith in, who betrayed me and betrayed our country. What candidate for President of the United States goes to Berlin to get American votes? Better yet, what president's wife would go to Spain during an economic crisis and tell the people to let them eat cake, while Obama and his Bush bankster buddies bankrupt us again? It's business as usual. Raid the economy. Implode it, because they must change the currency. And to do that, they have to have crises.
just a kiss away. It's just a kiss away, kiss away, kiss away. It's just a 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 kiss away. Oh yeah.
UN Agenda 21, bailouts, sellouts, Lehman Brothers, Goldman Sachs, false flag, terror attacks, Bill Gates, Henry Kissinger, New World Order, mind control, Bank of America stealing homes with cut and paste mortgage loans, police, state, taser guns, FEMA camps, mad to run, Monsanto rules the food supply while Big Pharma dopes your mind. Prison system, profiteers, foundations, fund the fears, fund the evil through the years. The world's not as it appears. CIA smuggles drugs while Wachovia and Wells Fargo launder them, then give the proceeds to the owners of the Federal Reserve Bank. Now the IRS takes money out of every single check. Money they created out of thin air and leave you with debt. They want to make you a serf, a slave to their demand. They want to take your life in every way they can. Fluoride, GMO, vaccines, chemtrails, United Nations genocide. The world they show us is not real. This is how they kill and steal. Rothschild, Bundy, Rockefeller, Club of Rome. On the Georgia Guide, songs it's written in stone. Cut through the matrix, awaken to the lies. Do not be hypnotized. We are one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay.